The massive starship descended slowly through the shimmering atmosphere of the planet Veridra. Commander Jace stood silently on the observation deck, watching the sprawling city below. Tall towers of glass and metal, glowing softly beneath the alien sky. The air shimmered with unfamiliar colors, and strange flying creatures darted between the buildings. Jace's mission was simple yet daunting. Represent humanity to the Viridran Empire and secure peaceful relations. But as he prepared to step off the ship, he adjusted the heavy, old-fashioned armor that covered his body. It was nothing like the sleek, shimmering suits he'd seen in the Viridran videos. Bulky and clunky, made of worn metal plates patched together over years. It had served him well on Earth. But here, he was sure it made him look like a relic. When he entered the Grand Palace, the first thing that caught his eye was the alien princess, Lyra. She was seated on a raised platform, surrounded by advisors and guards. Her skin was a shimmering shade of blue-green, her eyes large and intelligent, with a sharp glint that made it clear she wasn't used to being impressed. Lyra's gaze immediately fell on Jace's armor, and a small, almost imperceptible smile curled on her lips. It was a smile full of disbelief, almost mockery. She whispered something to a nearby aide, and a few heads turned to look at him with quiet amusement. Jace felt the weight of their stares, but held his ground. He wasn't here to win a fashion contest. His mission was bigger than appearances. The room fell silent as the ambassador was announced. Lyra rose gracefully, her eyes never leaving him. "You come to our palace wearing armor that looks like it belongs in a museum," she said, her voice clear and cool. "Tell me, Commander, do you expect us to be impressed?" Jace met her gaze steadily. "I come as a representative of humanity," he replied calmly. "Not as a warrior who boasts of shiny armor." The princess raised an eyebrow. "Then what is it you hope to show us?" "Something more important than metal and light shows," Jace said. "A willingness to understand and work together." Lyra's expression softened slightly, though her skepticism remained. "Very well. Let us see if your actions speak louder than your armor." As the reception began, Jace noticed the curious glances from the Viridran nobles and their high-tech garments. Their technology gleamed under the palace's bright lights, highlighting the stark contrast between them and the human visitor. Yet, despite their doubts, the princess's eyes followed him with unexpected interest. The armor might have been old-fashioned, but the man beneath it carried something far more intriguing. A calm confidence and a quiet strength that made the whole room hold its breath. And so the first day of their meeting ended, with a princess who scoffed, and a man who had yet to reveal the true power behind his armor. The grand hall of the Viridran Palace was alive with music and light. Jewel-toned banners fluttered softly in the breeze from hidden vents, and elegant guests from all corners of the empire mingled, their conversations weaving a web of different languages and accents. Commander Jace stood near the entrance, feeling the weight of countless eyes upon him. Princess Lyra watched from her elevated seat, her gaze sharp and curious. She had expected the human ambassador to be nothing more than a curiosity, a simple creature from a distant, less advanced world. His armor still looked clumsy, and his manners, though respectful, were unfamiliar to her. Yet something about him made her pause. The princess decided to invite him to join the gathering. A royal aide approached Jace and extended an ornate invitation. "Princess Lyra requests your presence at the reception," the aide said politely. Jace nodded and followed the guide through the crowd. As he moved among the guests, whispers and stares followed him like shadows. Some nobles smiled politely. Others exchanged doubtful glances. The contrast between the sleek, flowing robes of the Viridrans and Jace's practical, worn armor was impossible to miss. Lyra greeted him with a nod. "Welcome," she said coolly. "Your arrival has stirred more interest than I expected." Jace gave a small smile. "I hope that interest leads to understanding." She tilted her head. "Many here doubt your world's strength. They see your armor and think you lack the power to stand with us." Jace looked down briefly at the battered plates covering his arms and chest. "Strength isn't always shown by armor or weapons," he replied. "Sometimes it's what lies beneath." The princess raised an eyebrow. "Words are easy. Show me then. Prove that your people are more than stories and old metal." Before Jace could answer, the palace's crystal orchestra began to play a soft, haunting melody. The guests turned their attention to a demonstration of Veridran culture. Elegant dances, intricate light displays, and displays of their advanced technology. Jace watched, absorbing every detail. Despite his different background, he found beauty in their traditions and grace in their movements. When the demonstration ended, Lyra stepped closer, lowering her voice. "Tell me, Commander, what does your armor hide? What secrets do humans keep beneath such simple protection?" Jace hesitated a moment, then said, "It's not what the armor hides, but what the wearer brings to it. My people rely on creativity, resilience, and the will to survive. Qualities that can't be forged in metal alone." Lyra studied him silently. For the first time, her eyes held a flicker of respect. The room around them continued its lively chatter, but between the princess and the human, something unspoken passed. A challenge, a promise, and perhaps the beginning of understanding. As the night wore on, Jace realized this was only the first step in a long journey. The princess who had scoffed at his armor might soon discover that the greatest power lay not in shining steel, but in the heart and mind of a human. The following morning, the palace courtyard was bathed in soft golden light. Princess Lyra stood by the marble fountain, watching Commander Jace prepare for the day's events. Today was no ordinary day. A demonstration was planned to test the strength and skill of the visitors. It was a tradition of the Veridran Empire to assess newcomers, a way to prove their worth. Lyra's lips curved into a faint smile as she glanced at Jace's armor, still bulky and battered. She had already made up her mind. No human could match the grace and power of the Veridran warriors. Their suits shimmered with energy fields, adapting to every movement like a second skin. Jace's heavy plates looked like old relics from a forgotten time. The crowd gathered, nobles and dignitaries whispering eagerly. Jace stood at the center of the courtyard, calm and focused. Lyra's voice rang out, clear and confident. "Commander Jace, show us what your armor can do." Jace took a deep breath and nodded. Slowly, deliberately, he began to move. His steps were steady, his posture firm but relaxed. The clanking of his armor echoed softly, but there was no hesitation in his motions. He navigated the obstacles with practiced ease, his eyes sharp and calculating. The Veridran nobles murmured among themselves, some smirking at his obvious lack of sleekness. Lyra, however, studied him closely. There was something about his movements, not fast or flashy, but purposeful and strong. Then, as the demonstration reached its peak, Jace did something unexpected. He stopped. With deliberate care, he began to remove his armor, piece by piece. The heavy plates clattered gently on the stone floor, revealing a lean figure beneath, not bulky or intimidating, but composed and steady. The crowd gasped. Princess Lyra's eyes widened. This was not the clumsy human they had mocked. Beneath the armor, Jace wore a suit of flexible material embedded with sensors and lightweight technology, designed to enhance agility and monitor his condition. Lyra stepped forward, her voice softer now. "You surprised me, Commander. Why hide such innovation beneath that armor?" Jace met her gaze. Sometimes, appearances protect what is truly valuable. This armor was a symbol, not of strength, but of history and humility. The real strength lies in adaptability and understanding. The princess nodded slowly. "You have shown more than skill today. You have shown wisdom." As the crowd whispered in astonishment, Jace finished removing the last piece of armor. Without the heavy plates, he moved with a new freedom, his agility clear and impressive. Lyra's skepticism began to fade. The man before her was unlike any visitor she had ever met, not because of his armor, but because of the courage to reveal what lay beneath. The demonstration ended with polite applause, but the true victory was quiet and profound. The princess, who had scoffed at his armor, found herself speechless, not from defeat, but from unexpected respect. Later, as they walked through the palace gardens, Lyra broke the silence. "You carry your past with you, but you also embrace the future. That is a rare strength." Jace smiled. "Perhaps we can learn from each other." And with that, a new chapter in their story began, one where old judgments gave way to curiosity, and where armor was not the measure of a person's worth. After the demonstration, the palace settled into a quieter rhythm. The bright lights and murmurs faded, replaced by the soft rustle of leaves in the gardens. Princess Lyra led Commander Jace through winding paths lined with strange, glowing flowers. The air was warm and fragrant, carrying a calm that contrasted sharply with the palace's usual bustle. Lyra glanced at Jace, her expression curious but guarded. "You've shown skill and wisdom today," she said quietly. "But tell me, why do you wear that old armor when you have such advanced technology beneath it?" Jace smiled softly. "That armor is part of my history. It reminds me where I come from, and the challenges my people have faced. Sometimes it's not about having the newest or flashiest tools, but about respect for what has shaped us." The princess nodded thoughtfully. "Our people are proud of tradition, too. We believe strength comes from power and display. You challenge that belief." "Strength can mean many things," Jace replied. "Sometimes it is patience, resilience, or the ability to adapt." They stopped by a small pond, its surface shimmering like glass. Lyra looked into the water as if searching for answers. "You speak as if you understand more than just battle," she said. "What else do you bring from your world?" Jace crouched beside the pond, tracing a finger along the smooth stones. "On Earth, we have learned that cooperation and understanding can solve problems weapons cannot. Our greatest challenges have come not from enemies, but from the need to work together despite our differences." Lyra's eyes met his, the glow of the pond reflecting softly. "Our empire has faced unrest. Different factions within our own people challenge the old ways. Many believe strength lies only in dominance. But power alone can divide," Jace said gently. "Sometimes, listening and finding common ground leads to stronger unity." For a long moment, the two stood in silence. The princess felt a stirring within her, a question she had never dared to ask aloud. Could there be a different way to lead, one that combined strength with understanding? Breaking the quiet, Lyra turned to Jace. "Would your people teach us this? Help us find balance?" Jace smiled warmly. "That is why I am here, to share, to learn, and to build a future together." A breeze stirred the leaves above, carrying petals that danced in the air. The moment felt fragile yet full of promise. Lyra glanced down at her hands. "I have never met a warrior like you, Commander. Not one who wears history on his shoulders with such quiet pride. And I have never met a leader so willing to listen," Jace replied. As the sun dipped lower, casting golden light across the garden, they walked back toward the palace. The walls seemed less imposing now, the gap between two worlds beginning to close. The princess who had once scoffed at armor was learning to see beyond it, to the strength in a man who carried more than metal. She was speechless not because of surprise alone, but because of hope. And in that hope, a new story began, one where humanity and the Veridran Empire might walk side by side, stronger together than apart. The palace's grand library was unlike anything Commander Jace had ever seen. Towering shelves curved endlessly, filled with glowing scrolls and holographic books that floated gently in the air. Princess Lyra led him through the maze of knowledge, her steps light and purposeful. "This is where we keep the history and wisdom of our people," she explained. "It is said that knowledge is the true armor of a leader." Jace glanced around, amazed. "On Earth, we say the same. Wisdom can protect more than steel ever could." Lyra paused by a table where ancient texts lay open, their symbols shifting softly like living things. Tell me, Commander, how do your people prepare for challenges without the same weapons and power we prize? Jace smiled, folding his hands. We rely on creativity and cooperation. When faced with danger or uncertainty, we find ways to work together, to solve problems with ideas, not just force. The princess frowned slightly. Our empire values strength. We have fought wars and expanded our borders through might. It is difficult to imagine another way. Strength can be shown in many forms, Jace said gently. Sometimes the greatest power is the ability to change, to understand others, and to build something lasting. Lyra studied him, her curiosity growing. Have your people never faced enemies who only respect power? We have, Jace admitted, but we learned that even the strongest walls can be broken from within if people do not trust each other. Trust and respect are stronger than fear. They moved deeper into the library, where a map of the galaxy floated above a pedestal. Lyra pointed to a cluster of stars. There are many threats beyond our borders, and old alliances are fragile. We need more than weapons to survive. Jace nodded. Exactly. Sometimes, survival depends on understanding the unknown, forming new bonds. The princess looked at him, a new respect in her eyes. Your armor hides your past, but your words reveal your future. Jace smiled. And your openness shows a willingness to grow. For the first time, Lyra felt the heavy weight of her responsibilities in a different way. She had always believed strength was measured by dominance and power, but the human before her challenged that belief. What would you suggest we do? She asked quietly. Listen, Jace replied simply. Listen to your people, to your allies, and even to those you consider rivals. Build bridges, not walls. Lyra considered his words, feeling a spark of hope. The empire could change, but it would require courage beyond the battlefield. As they left the library, the evening light painted long shadows on the palace walls. The princess's mind was full of questions, but one thing was clear. The man who had once seemed so ordinary was becoming someone extraordinary. And in that growing bond between human and alien, the first seeds of a new future were taking root. The palace gardens were alive with soft light as dusk settled over Veridra. Commander Jace and Princess Lyra walked side by side, the hum of distant city life fading behind the thick walls. Between the glowing plants and the gentle breeze, the two found a rare moment of calm. Lyra broke the silence first. You speak often of cooperation and trust. But how do you build those things when fear and suspicion are so common? Jace looked out over the garden pond, its surface reflecting the colors of the setting sun. It's never easy, but people need to see that others are willing to listen and understand. Small acts of kindness, honesty in words, and patience can change minds. The princess frowned. Our empire has many factions. Some do not want peace or change. They believe strength is only shown through dominance. Then you must show them a different kind of strength, Jace said. Strength that comes from courage. The courage to try something new, to admit mistakes, and to find common ground. Lyra nodded slowly. It sounds simple, but it will be difficult. There are many who will resist. Every great change is, Jace agreed. But the future depends on it. You don't have to do it alone. Allies can come from unexpected places. She looked at him thoughtfully. You have shown me much already, Commander. Not just about your world, but about how to face challenges differently. Jace smiled. And you have shown me that even those who seem distant and proud can learn and grow. As they walked further, the princess pointed to a cluster of strange, glowing plants. These flowers are fragile, but survive in harsh conditions by adapting. They remind me of what you said, strength in adaptability. Jace knelt to examine one closely. Exactly. Life finds a way when it is flexible. Leaders must do the same. They continued their walk, sharing stories of their worlds, the struggles, the hopes, and the lessons learned. The bond between them grew stronger, built on respect, and a shared vision. Later, in the quiet of the palace, Lyra found herself thinking about the human who had arrived in armor, but showed her a new kind of power. She realized that beneath the surface of every armor, every tradition, there was a chance to change. For the first time, the princess felt hope, not just for her empire, but for the future of both their peoples. The night deepened, and the stars blinked alive in the sky. In that moment, two worlds stood closer than ever, united by the promise of understanding. The palace buzzed with an unusual tension. News had arrived of a growing crisis, environmental shifts threatening Veridra's rich ecosystems and the stability of its cities. The royal council gathered urgently, their faces lined with worry. Princess Lyra stood at the center, calm but determined. Commander Jace listened carefully as the scientists explained the danger: rising temperatures, failing crops, and erratic weather patterns. These changes could disrupt the entire empire. Lyra turned to Jace. "Your people have faced crises like this. What would you suggest?" Jace nodded thoughtfully. "On Earth, we have learned that technology alone isn't enough. We must combine it with respect for nature and cooperation across all communities." The princess raised an eyebrow. "Many here believe only strong leadership can solve problems. They rely on control. Control without understanding can make things worse," Jace replied. "Solutions come when people work together, sharing knowledge and resources." Lyra's eyes searched his face. "Can your people really work together despite their differences?" Jace smiled softly. "It's not always easy, but we have learned to listen and adapt. Sometimes, the greatest strength is humility." Inspired by his words, Lyra called for a new kind of meeting, a gathering not just of nobles and scientists, but farmers, engineers, and even young students. She wanted every voice to be heard. At first, the idea shocked the council, but Lyra was firm. "If we only listen to the powerful, we miss the solutions the people hold." Jace helped organize the sessions, sharing methods his people used to encourage cooperation. Slowly, barriers began to break down. Ideas flowed freely, and new plans took shape. One young engineer proposed a way to recycle the palace's energy to help nearby farms. A farmer suggested planting new crops more suited to the changing climate. A scientist found ways to predict storms earlier. Lyra watched these conversations with growing hope. This was leadership she hadn't expected, one that embraced change and valued every voice. When the council reconvened, Lyra spoke confidently. "We cannot rely on armor or force to save our world. We need unity and innovation." Her words surprised many, but the evidence of cooperation was clear. Jace smiled quietly, proud to stand beside her. The princess who once scoffed at his armor was now leading her people with a new strength. That night, as the stars shone brightly, Lyra and Jace looked out over the city. The crisis was far from over, but for the first time, hope burned strong. Two worlds were coming together, not through weapons or power, but through shared purpose. The atmosphere in the Veridran palace had shifted. Where once there had been skepticism and whispers, now there was a quiet buzz of curiosity and hope. Princess Lyra found herself at the center of this change, her ideas no longer dismissed but considered seriously by the council and her people. Commander Jace stood beside her, a steady presence in a world that often felt uncertain. Together, they had sparked something new, a partnership between their peoples that promised more than just survival. One afternoon, Lyra invited Jace to the palace's innovation chamber. It was a vast room filled with devices and tools, many unfamiliar to the human ambassador. Screens floated in midair, displaying data from across the empire. "This is where we design our future," Lyra said, her voice filled with pride. "But until recently, our ideas have been limited by tradition and fear of change." Jace nodded. "Innovation requires courage and the willingness to risk failure." They approached a large table where engineers were gathered, discussing a new project to create sustainable energy sources. Jace listened carefully, offering suggestions from his own experiences on Earth. The room felt alive with possibility. As they worked, Lyra observed how Jace's different perspective helped solve problems. His ideas were often simple but effective, reminders that sometimes the best solutions come from fresh eyes and open minds. Later, Lyra asked, "Do you think your people have ever faced a challenge like this? Balancing old ways with new needs?" Jace smiled. "Many times. Change is never easy, but it's necessary. The key is to honor the past while embracing the future." Lyra considered his words. "I want our empire to be strong in that way. Not just powerful, but wise and adaptable." Jace looked at her, respect shining in his eyes. "You already are. Your willingness to listen and learn is the greatest strength of all." Days passed with meetings, experiments, and planning. The partnership between human and Veridran grew stronger, inspiring others to join the effort. Young leaders stepped forward, eager to build a better world. One evening, as the sun set behind the palace towers, Lyra and Jace stood on a balcony overlooking the city. The lights below twinkled like stars. "I never imagined I would find an ally in a stranger from another world," Lyra said softly. Jace smiled. "Sometimes, the greatest strength comes from the most unexpected places." They stood in companionable silence, two leaders from different worlds united by a shared vision. The princess who had once scoffed at his armor now saw beyond appearances, to the heart and mind beneath. And in that quiet understanding, a new future was born. The palace council chamber was filled with a tense energy. Princess Lyra stood at the front, facing her advisors and nobles who were divided over the proposed reforms. Some clung tightly to tradition, fearing change would weaken the empire. Others quietly supported Lyra's vision, but hesitated to speak out. Commander Jace watched from the side, his calm presence steadying the room. He had learned much about the Veridran people and their ways, but he knew change was never easy, especially for those who had long held power. Lyra took a deep breath and began. "Our empire faces challenges that cannot be overcome by strength alone. We must adapt if we want to survive and thrive." Murmurs rose among the nobles. One elder spoke sharply. "We built this empire on power and discipline. Why risk everything on uncertain ideas?" Jace stepped forward, his voice firm but respectful. "Because strength without understanding is fragile. When people fear change, it's because they do not see the future clearly. It is our duty to show them." Lyra nodded. "We have already seen that cooperation between our people brings solutions that benefit everyone." Slowly, the room began to quiet. Another noble, younger and less rigid, spoke. "If these reforms help our people, then they deserve a chance." The council debated long into the evening, weighing fears against hope. Lyra and Jace answered questions honestly, showing evidence of progress from their recent projects. The turning point came when a respected scientist shared how the new environmental plans were already improving farming yields and city health. By night's end, the council voted to adopt the reforms, with conditions to review and adjust as needed. It was not a complete victory, but a significant step. Lyra exhaled deeply, relief and pride mixing in her heart. She looked at Jace, who smiled quietly. Together, they had faced resistance and found a path forward. Later, in the quiet of her chambers, Lyra reflected on the journey. The man who had arrived in simple armor had taught her that true strength was not in appearances or tradition, but in courage, openness, and partnership. Her thoughts were interrupted by a soft knock. Jace entered, carrying a small device from Earth, a symbol of their ongoing exchange of knowledge. "Your armor taught me many lessons," Lyra said softly, "but your presence has taught me more." Jace smiled. "And your willingness to change has taught me hope." They stood together, two leaders from different worlds, united by a vision that had once seemed impossible. The princess who had scoffed was now a champion of new ideas. The human who had removed his armor had left her speechless, not from disbelief, but from respect and admiration. And as the stars gleamed outside the window, a new chapter was beginning. one of unity, growth, and shared strength. The morning sun cast warm light across the palace courtyard, where Princess Lyra and Commander Jace stood side by side. The air buzzed with a gentle energy, a celebration of change and new beginnings. Today marked the signing of the historic pact between humanity and the Veridran Empire, a symbol of unity forged not by power or force, but by understanding and respect. Lyra glanced at Jace, a soft smile touching her lips. She remembered the first time she had seen him, clad in heavy, outdated armor, and how she had scoffed at his appearance. Now she saw beyond that, into the heart of a man who carried strength far greater than any metal. As the crowd gathered, leaders and citizens alike, Lyra stepped forward. "This day is more than a treaty," she said clearly. "It is proof that two worlds, different though they may be, can come together to build a future greater than either could alone." Jace nodded, his voice steady. "We have learned that true strength is found not in weapons or armor, but in the courage to listen, to change, and to stand together." Applause filled the courtyard, echoing beneath the high arches of the palace. The air was thick with hope. Later, as the festivities continued, Lyra and Jace walked through the gardens, now alive with vibrant colors and smiling faces. "Do you remember the day I took off my armor?" Jace asked quietly. Lyra laughed softly. "How could I forget? You left me speechless." Jace smiled. "I was not trying to impress you. I just wanted to be understood." "And you were," she said, "more than you know." The two stood together, looking up at the twin suns setting on the horizon. In that moment, the distance between their worlds seemed to vanish. Lyra realized that strength was not about appearances or tradition, but about the connections they had built, between people, between planets, and between hearts. As night fell and stars sparkled above, the princess and the ambassador knew this was only the beginning. Together, they would face whatever challenges the future held, not as strangers, but as partners. The armor was gone, but the respect and admiration remained, stronger than ever. And so, a new era dawned, where humanity's courage and the Veridran Empire's wisdom walked forward hand in hand.